I'm David Kessler. I'm a death and grief expert, and I'm here on Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. We're going to deal with some of those abandonment issues. Tough. Lots of them.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Hello. Welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. I am, guess who? I'm Jake Hogan. If you have a question or a comment, appreciate the letters to, or the emails to dbawjk@gmail.com. And I will answer each and every one. And I'm always looking for the big life question that my guest and I can answer. I will mention your name on the air if you want me to, and I will discuss your question with the same intensity and purpose with which you ask it. So please send along your questions. Today, I have a really interesting show. It's with a grief expert named David Kessler. Now, David is a guy who's helped many, many people for many, many years dealing with grief. It's all about loss. We feel grief when we lose a job. We feel grief when we lose a boyfriend or a girlfriend. We feel grief when we have to move. It's all grief. It's all grief all the time, which is why this guy is making big bank. But we'll talk about all of this. I've had my share of grief. The day that my sister died, I went to work. That she died 3 a.m. I was on the set of a show I was making by 9 a.m. And I think it wasn't, people said, "You're so brave." And it's like, it wasn't so brave. It was just helpful to have a place to go. Like, that was how I dealt with my grief in that moment, was having a place to go and being surrounded by people and feeling like I had something to do that I was good at. So everybody has their own way of dealing with things. My way of dealing with things often has been to put grief at a distance. And maybe that's not the best way to handle it. I will ask our expert when we see him right after this.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
David Kessler, thank you for being here. We're going to officially start the show.
I'm thrilled to be here with you. Officially, I'm thrilled. Officially.
I asked you to be here because you've spent your life working on a very important thing, and that's grief.
Death and grief.
Death and grief. Brown told me, remember, it's not just death, it's grief. And I said, I think he's grief. He said, no, it's death and grief.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
The death shapes the grief.
But grief doesn't have to be about death.
Correct.
Right?
But here's the thing. Yeah. You're exactly right. Grief, when we use that word, everyone thinks death.
Right.
But I do think of it as a death. A breakup is the death of that relationship.
Right. Yes.
A divorce is the death of that marriage.
Sure.
A job loss is the death of that paycheck with those people. So they are endings. And I think of grief as a change you didn't want.
Right. But death is such a dramatic word. Can't you just say loss? Can't we just say loss?
Passed over, transitioned.
Yeah. All right.
But transitions have gotten tricky.
Yeah. No, I understand.
It's gotten tricky.
It has gotten tricky. But
I said that someone recently, a couple of years ago, I said someone's transitioned.
Right.
That they had died. And someone went,
man
what?
Or woman.
They're becoming a woman.
Right.
I'm like, oh, got to quit using that word.
Yeah.
New word.
So
I do use death. They died.
Now, you come to this work through your own personal experience?
I am a buffet of losses.
Buffet of losses. Okay.
So I grew up with a bipolar mother, bless her soul, a father who was an addict, who had horrible anger and rage issues and beat me, sexually abused. Then by the time my mother was dying at 13, she was in a hospital across the street where we were staying in the hotel. Fire broke out. Next thing we know is we're out there, shooting starts. Turns out to be one of the first mass shootings in the U.S. So I thought I was damaged and screwed up for life. And that really put me on this journey to understand, is there a better way to die? Is there my parents, when my mom was on her deathbed, were discussing monogamy, which you should not discuss in front of your kids.
Right.
Just a note to the listener.
Right.
So it really, like all these things that really put me on this path to eventually helping myself and others.
I know that you worked with Elisabeth Kübler-Ross.
Correct, who did the 5 stages of death, and then we adapted them. I was honored to work with her to adapt them for grief.
Right.
Denial.
Right.
Anger, bargaining, depression, the sadness, and acceptance.
That's just my morning.
That's just your morning.
That is just
and
how
let me tell you, and they can happen in an hour.
Right.
In an hour.
Right.
You can circle, grief's messy. You don't have to do it linear in order.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work that way.
Right. It's interesting. You know, this show is, I ostensibly people come on here and help me with my problem.
Great.
And
I
so
can't wait.
You're here to help me with my problem. And my problem is often I don't allow myself to recognize the loss or the grief. Like I am in denial. I stay in stage 1 for a very long time.
What's that look like? Do you cap it? They're gone, but they're in a bit. Do you put a cap on it, or what do you do to sort of stay there?
You know, they're gone. It's all right. No, I don't accept the pain that comes along with the loss. I don't deny that they've gone.
All right,
I just deny that it's upsetting.
But let me ask you this. There is a thing called practical grievers.
Mm-hmm.
Practical grievers, I'm not a practical griever. They go to the funeral, they cry, and they're done and they move on.
Right.
You sure you couldn't be one of those?
I could be one of those, but I feel like I'm deficient. If that's it, then then I'm a robot. And that seems to be a problem.
Me being a non-practical griever, when I'm with practical grievers, I often feel like they don't have enough feelings,
right.
But they feel like I got way too many.
Okay.
They don't want to swim in feelings.
Right.
The way swimming in feelings helps me get to the other side. They're like, I don't need the swimming. I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like that. I've experienced a lot of loss over time, and sometimes it hits hard, but often it doesn't. And here's why. I think I'm aware that death is part of the deal. Right. And that it's gonna happen to me, it's gonna happen to you, it's gonna happen to all of us.
Let me tell you, statistics are in. 100% of us. 100. Right. You know, they've been tracking it pretty consistent.
Right.
And the other thing I want you to know about this is that you come from a long line of dead people.
That's true.
Every ancestor you've had has died.
Right. Some not soon enough, honestly.
Some not soon. Right. Well, that's your take on it.
Yeah.
That's your take.
Okay.
And we organically know how to do this. You're built to take a number of hits this lifetime. You are built for loss.
Okay, but I thought you were going to say we know how to do this, meaning we know how to die.
Not so much. We can get into that.
I want to get into that.
Things have gone wrong with that.
I know people who've died well.
Correct.
And I know people who've not died well.
Correct.
And I really, really, really want to die well. Like, that's a big goal of mine.
I can help you with that.
Okay. Being prepared for it is part of it. Understanding that it's not necessarily the world's biggest tragedy, but it's part of what is going on is part of it. My friend, I had a friend, Sam Simon, who is one of my mentors, who died of cancer. And he had a very good attitude towards death. He just says, it's happening, and I'm doing it, and I'm gonna fight for every day of life, but when it stops, it stops. He didn't believe in God, he didn't believe in heaven, he didn't believe there was something else, but he was okay. Right. He sort of accepted the reality of it. And to me, that is a very good way to be.
Right. And for people who are dying and their loved ones, the grief before the death actually has a name. It's called anticipatory grief.
Ah, okay.
It's the grief we start feeling before. And I always tell people, when you have a loved one who's dying, you got 2 things to do. Feel the anticipatory grief and don't attend the funeral early.
Okay.
Don't get there early. You know, you still, if you got a day with them, you got a day with them.
But what is the feel the anticipatory, what is that part? Like, how do you differentiate? How do you not spend that day crying?
Not about that. How do you not spend that day fighting it? Like, here's the things. family members who sit down with the doctor and hear the news, it's terminal, time's limited. The family members who say, doctor, they can't die. You've got to do everything for them. I mean, we got to, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it kills them. We got to do it. Do much worse, and the patient does much worse than those of us who go, okay, how can we make the most of the last?
Right.
How do we not fight it? It's the fighting it. You know, the thing, like our culture, here's why we do it wrong. In our culture, we're like raised with rage against the dying of the light. First of all, that was about blindness. It wasn't even about death.
Right.
So how do we, and I'm not talking about a child dying or someone tragically dying suddenly, but if someone's up in age or long illness and their time is coming, how do we not scream at the sunset of their life?
Right.
How do we sit there with them and be present?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My father, who listens to this podcast, hello, Dad.
Hi, Dad. Can I call him Dad? Or
Sure.
sorry, what's his
Arnie,
name?
Dad.
Arnie. Hi, Arnie. Hi, Arnie.
You know, he's 90 years old, and he says, like, I don't know how much time I have left. Maybe a year, 2 years, 5 years of it crazy. 5 years, and I'm not. And I don't say, no, you're wrong. I say, you're 90. We don't know. Like, I can agree with him without freaking out, saying, you're not saying, I won't accept that truth.
Right.
He's very accepting of that truth, and he's okay with it. I don't think he prefers being alive than being dead, but he's okay that that's the truth. It's interesting to me that there are people who, if hearing that, I have people in my life who hearing that would say, absolutely not. That's not true. You know, don't say that. Denial.
Don't talk that way.
Yes, don't talk that way.
We talk about that as bright siding or toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Don't talk that way. Well, I don't know. When can, like 95, can you start talking that way? 100, are you allowed to talk? I mean, can we go there? Now, here's one of the harsh realities of life. This is really the harshest thing, I think. We all have a lineup in our mind. We all, Dad's next. He's 90.
Right.
Janet's next after him. She's 88.
Right.
Someone else might cut line.
Of course.
All of a sudden, someone we know out of the blue can die at 30, 40, 50, 10, whenever it is. Car accident. Now, people go, well, thanks, David. That's depressing.
Yeah.
And what I say to that is, not if you understand you're trying to control.
Right.
When I let in the reality of like, holy crap, anyone can die. You could go on your way home. I could go on my way home. When I let that in, really let that in, because look, I live in this.
Right.
Day and night, phones ringing, someone unexpectedly die. When I live in that, it doesn't make me shut down and run for the hills. It makes me go, okay, if this is my last day, this is my last podcast.
Right.
Let me make it a good one.
Some people would cheer to have the last podcast.
This is the last podcast.
This is the last podcast,
so
thank God.
If it is, let me make it a good one.
Yes. Right.
And hopefully it's not. But let me make today an amazing day. What like tomorrow's going to be the day I really show up amazing? No, this day is as good as it gets.
Right. And there's an absurdity to all of this at the very core of the idea that we can sort of control the world and control our feelings and like all of that is kind of, I mean, that's my business. And that's my comedy writer business.
And I've learned death, is the ultimate thing we're trying to control. No control of that.
Right.
And then what that's all about is fear. And fear doesn't stop death. Fear stops life.
Yes. I agree with that. The other thing that we sort of crossed paths on was when Lucas was staying at our house. There was a young man, 12 years old, who had a brain disease, cancer, I think, and he was fighting it. He was from New York, and he was staying at our house while he was fighting it.
Still in touch with his mom.
Yeah, us too. And it was interesting to watch you comfort him or figure out how he could comfort himself during this crisis. Now, when you get called to do something like that, I don't know if you still do, but how does it not break your heart every time?
I realized early on, started at Children's Hospital, we have an illusion that everyone gets to 98. We have that illusion. Early on in my life, that illusion's not there. It got broken when I worked there. Right. So I live in reality now. The other thing, because of that, is imagine in my 20s and 30s, I remember someone said to me, if you're dying, you want David Kessler around. I can't tell you how much that bothered me. Because especially in my 20s and 30s, I wanted to be the person that you said, you're having a party, you know who you need? Well, you need David Kessler.
But what a compliment.
I didn't want to be like the death guy. But after I got past my ego, like what? Right. I kind of went, what's that about?
But that's a huge ego boost if you look at it.
Well, now I get it.
Yeah.
In my 20s and 30s, didn't get it.
I could have gotten laid being the death guy. I really could have.
See, you would have known how to work it better.
Absolutely.
You would have known how to work it. I didn't know how to work it.
All right.
I realized, all right, getting past that reaction, what is it that I do? And what I do is I walk into a room like nothing's going wrong. Mm-hmm. Like everyone else walks in, child, he's dying. And I'm like, nothing's going wrong. Let's just talk, be with each other.
But that's the essential part of this, that nothing's going wrong. This is part of the process. It happens, the process happens to 12-year-olds. The process happens to 90-year-olds. That is part of the process. It's not a mistake.
And I get that when I'm walking into anyone else's life.
Right.
I've had one of my own sons die. Let me tell you, for Lucas's mom in that moment, it's not like, oh yeah, kids die.
Of course.
For me, it wasn't like, oh yeah, kids die.
Right.
It's the hardest thing we go through in the world, whether it's your child or your 95-year-old parent.
Right.
It's brutal. People say to me,
but 95-year-old,
let's talk about this. Which grief is the worst?
Right. Your grief.
Then your grief.
Yeah, your
the
grief.
One you're in.
Sure. I get
the
it.
one you're in.
Yeah.
Like I can't do anyone else's grief work.
Right.
I can only do mine.
Right.
So at the end of the day, if we're comparing, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. You're in your mind. You're not in your heart. You don't have a broken mind. You have a broken heart.
The grief I've experienced, the weirdness of when I'm with somebody I love who's dying and sick and not only needs my comfort and my presence, but also my physical help with their physical being. You know, I've had to wipe the asses of people who I love, and I've had to carry them, and I've had to put medicine that they don't like in them, and all kinds of things so there's a trauma associated, not just grief, but grief associated with this sort of thing where I'm also put in a responsible position, and it's that to me is harder, is even harder.
And that is made harder by our modern society.
Yeah.
You know, I tell people, if you live in a house built before the 40s, you have a wide door so the casket could come in. I always say I'm teaching people what our great-grandparents knew. They knew how to be with the dying. What we find traumatic because it doesn't look like TV. Right. It's much harder. You don't see a cleaning shit on TV. It never happens. You don't see a carrying.
That's what my pilot cleaning shit never went. Very difficult. I tried to sell it.
Could we work together?
Yeah, we could try. We could try.
But anyway, I haven't thought about that. Yeah. But, you know, we forget, like, even the parlor, your great-grandparents had a parlor.
Yes.
The parlor moved into the funeral home. Where did illness go? It went into the nursing home, into the hospital, into the assisted living.
Right.
Even your front room, one of the major magazines of the time, said it shouldn't be a dying room. It should be a living room.
Right.
So we changed it from a living room, dying room, to a living room that we all have now. Even the coffee table where the casket sat.
Right.
That was for the casket.
I had no idea.
So it's all around us, but we don't know how to be with it.
It's true.
You know this. I often think about one of the holiest gifts we can give to one another, and you probably have heard this from Judaism, is a gift that can't be repaid. when you're with that dying person, whether it's giving them water, they're not going to be able to do it for you in 2 years.
Right.
It's an amazing gift.
It
And
is.
we weren't taught that.
I feel.
And it's not supposed to be pleasant.
Right.
Not ever going to go there.
It's not pleasant.
There's no how can we make our
Right.
cleaning shit script fun.
Right.
It's not going to be that.
Right. Now, here's another question I have. Now, I, generally speaking, do not like to attend funerals.
Because?
I have a little social anxiety when I go to funerals of seeing people. I also, the person that we're honoring at that funeral is not going to know that I'm there. Yeah, when I go, I'm thinking that I'm comforting the living, the people, the grieving, the other people who are grieving there. And then I also think,
what if you are?
And that's fine, but I think that my presence doesn't really matter most of the time. Most of the time.
How are you at birthday parties?
Similar, a little bit anxious to go and don't like the big crowds.
I think birthday parties, like when I explain to young kids, when they're like, what about the funeral? What's the funeral? How do I explain? I always say to them, you know how when we went to grandpa's birthday party, happy birthday is another way we say I love you.
Right.
And going to the funeral and saying goodbye is another way we say I love you. Sometimes the I love you's for the family. Maybe it's for the person.
Right.
But not a surprise that you got anxiety around both.
Tell me about your book. Tell me about this book, Finding Meaning.
So the last book.
Have you found meaning? First of all, have you found meaning?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So last book was Finding Meaning. Became a bestseller, did so well. You know, Kübler-Ross's stages, I added a 6th stage, meaning. I think we're a generation that doesn't want to stop on just accepting it.
Right.
We want more. And I want to take Viktor Frankl's work and really connect the dots modern day for people in grief. And so I was thrilled that the Kübler-Ross family and foundation allowed me to add a 6th stage to her stages. And after the book came out, I got a massive waiting list of people who wanted to work with me that there's no way I would ever have the time.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to put Finding Meaning into a workbook.
Oh, fantastic.
That's literally like you're sitting down with me. And this is what I would have someone do.
There is nothing the people who are dying like more than homework.
It's the grievers.
Oh, for the grievers.
It's the grievers. Good. It's not for
Thank God. Okay,
it's for the grievers.
Right,
it's afterwards.
All right.
And the other thing is, there's a lot of people, maybe like you, it's not in you to see a counselor. It's not in you to go to a grief group. Maybe that's you. I don't know. But you're like, can I just do this on my own?
I would hate a grief group.
Is there a self-study? Yeah. And I made this easy, manageable to just go through.
Right.
So it's a workbook. I never thought I'd do a workbook, but I'm like, I think this is what would help me.
Is there any coloring involved?
You can do coloring.
Okay, good.
And
fantastic.
I'll tell you one of the things that's in here. Let me just show you.
I see the chart.
The hero's journey.
Oh, fantastic.
You know that from the movie world.
I do that from writing.
I wanted to adapt the hero's journey for grief.
Okay.
And to really talk about how each of us is on our hero's journey and going through grief.
How are you doing on your journey?
I'm doing really well.
Good.
Look, for all I've been through, that buffet I mentioned, you know, I have a lot of happiness and joy in my life.
Good. That brings up an issue. I can be triggered into grief or loss many years after the loss has occurred by a song or a being in a place or in my sister's case, a box of Pop-Tarts. There's something that can hit me and it's just remind me that they're gone. And then suddenly I am experiencing the sadness of their loss. And I'm not saying that's not appropriate, but I find it's surprising.
Can we break that down?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So we have a number of things that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you have a sweet memory. It touches your heart. It's just more emotions. It touches your heart.
Right.
The other thing, we also have what's called a grief burst. This is early on especially. Someone's going back to work, they're trying to handle things and all that, and all of a sudden the grief burst out. They can't contain it. The other thing
what is that?
It's just you're trying to control the emotions and you can't. Like, if you don't deal with grief, it will deal with you. So I tell people, go on a grief walk before work. Go on your lunch hour and think about the grief. But this is like when people are in their first month and, really it's intense first few months. The other thing is, you and I could talk about anyone we know. Anyone we know, we don't just like, I love them. That's not how love looks.
Right.
Love looks like, oh my gosh, I love them. Oh, today I hate them.
Right.
Today they're driving me nuts. Today, da-da-da-da. It's like that. When someone dies, that continues.
Right.
Something happens and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much love. So there's the memory, there's the grief burst, and there's also a love burst.
Yeah.
A little burst of, oh my gosh.
But the love burst sometimes is accompanied with a tinge of the sadness that they're not here.
Right.
So like, it's not always, and I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but it's not always clean and clear. Like, oh gosh, I love that person. It's like, I love that person. And all right, let's talk about Yeah. So I'm at Disneyland and I was there with my sister's daughter and my sister's grandson. And we were at Disneyland and I was having a great day with those people, but every now and then feeling the sadness that my sister wasn't alive to see this and be part of it. And in addition to that, there's a loss, how she died, which was of breast cancer. So I'm having this image of the pain that she went through and the difficulty of her experience when she was trying to stay alive and couldn't. So it's all wrapped up. It's all wrapped up in walking, through Fantasyland.
Maybe a little post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
Not disorder.
Yeah.
But maybe a little post-traumatic stress. Just the idea, if I was with you in that moment,
mm-hmm.
or I was telling you how to handle that moment, I would go, Jay, it is so tragic how she suffered. Not suffering anymore. That's the past. If there's an afterlife, she's fine now.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine now. Thank goodness that moment's over. Post-traumatic stress isn't that we remembered the past. If you just went, oh my gosh, how she suffered, so glad that's
mm-hmm.
over. That's one thing. The is you're beginning to re-feel it.
Yeah.
And you want to remember it, not re-feel it. Another trick with that is a hack that I use is sometimes go, that was then, this is now. That was then, she was suffering. Now, suffering's done, over. Kids are okay, we're okay.
The fact that she's not able to come to us to Disneyland, in my mind,
will always be sad.
Means that she's suffering. Even though she's not suffering because she's not here, but her loss of not being able to have that experience is wrapped up in having that experience.
So give it to her.
Meaning?
I remember I was in Yosemite and I got this tinge of, this is just me,
mm-hmm.
may contradict some religions, this is just me. I was in Yosemite and I went, oh, this is so beautiful. I can't believe my son will never see this. And I quickly got I am seeing it. I am seeing it. Maybe she is seeing it through your eyes. I mean, look, as much as we don't know about anything else, we don't know about that either.
Right. And if she is seeing it, she should pay for Disneyland. She should be part of the payment because that's expensive. I mean, for 3 people at Disneyland cost me a fucking fortune.
I would think she's got connections for front of the line pass.
I hope so.
Front of the line pass, I would hope.
That would be good. I have questions for you. This is now something we like to call question time.
It's question time.
This is a question from Awesome Kevin that I'd like to hear about the kind of grieving that starts before a person dies. We have a family member right now in declining health, losing cognition. She's not on death's door or anything, but we definitely feel as though this is the beginning of the end. Really tough time.
It is. That's exactly right. And here's the thing. We forget, like when you're talking about chronic illness, dementia, Alzheimer's, there's a million little losses that go up to the big loss.
Right.
And it's also really hard for Kevin and his family and anyone who's going through that, because every time you see the person, you remember who they were.
Right.
And if you can try to, this is almost impossible to do,
Right.
to also remember who they were, but also be with who they are now.
Yes.
And not like every moment's like, why aren't they that? Because you're fighting reality
Right.
again.
People change. This is a person in change, and you have to sort of accept that change.
Another hack is, if someone's really sick, even sometimes people are hard to look at. I always say, look at their eyes.
Yeah.
Our eyes never change.
Yeah.
No matter how ill our bodies get, our eyes don't change.
Yeah. I know people who aren't sick at all and are hard to look at. So that's, I try to remember looking at their eyes.
If he wants a book, the book's The Needs of the Dying, the first book. The
Okay.
Mother Teresa
Okay,
book.
sure.
First book, The Needs
Yes.
of the Dying. It really walks
You had a
people
fan.
through
Mother
it.
Teresa was your fan. Who has that? Who has that?
Crazy.
Like a good...
Let me tell you, I have a career
Yeah.
because of Mother Teresa
That's a
and
blurb.
Elisabeth Kübler-Ross.
That's a
She
blurb.
gave me,
I know,
like,
that's a blurb,
But it
Mother
wasn't
Teresa.
a blurb. It was, you're not allowed to call it a blurb. It was a praise.
Okay. Well,
She
praise.
doesn't blurb,
Well,
praises.
Well, you got a nice praise. That
I
was
got
a
a
nice
nice
praise from Mother
praise.
Teresa.
Can I tell you one other thing?
Yeah.
That happens, like amazing, out of the blue, shocking,
Mm-hmm.
years ago, that she praises my first book. My family? What? No Rabbi Kushner? And I'm like, well, I couldn't get him.
Right.
But you should try to get Rabbi. Well, the book's done.
Right.
He didn't respond.
Sure.
Years later, I met Rabbi Kushner.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that story. He goes, you did good.
Yeah, you did good.
You did good. It's okay.
Yeah.
You did good.
They're like business associates,
They're
Rabbi
business
Kushner.
associates,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. So here's a question from Scott, who says, how do you know if you're done grieving?
It's a great question. You remember with more love than pain.
Say that again.
You're going to remember with more love than pain.
Okay.
And I would even question, is there a done? Don't we always remember our loved ones, our parents? The thing is, we forget that grief is also love.
Right.
So we're always going to remember them. Like people say to me, how long is my sister going to grieve? How long is my wife going to grieve? I'm always like, how long is the person going to be dead?
Right.
They're going to be dead a long time. You're going to grieve a long time. But that doesn't mean always pain.
Well, that's
It
the
can
thing. You're
become
waiting
love.
for that balance
Where it
of-
becomes love.
where it becomes love, or where it becomes it's not misery causing every time you remember that person, but there's also that joy that comes
Right.
from remembering the positive.
Right.
Yeah, and it's sometimes hard to get to.
Hard to get to. It takes a long time.
I don't feel this way anymore, but I used to be angry. I was angry at some people who died at their own hand. The suicide, conscious suicide, and also people who were addicted to drugs and just killed themselves through. I used to get angry at those people.
You know the new reality of this?
I assume it's medical. It's a medical cause, and that's what chemistry has caused this to happen, and that's why they're doing this.
We now know that it is an illness of the mind.
Right.
There's no choice. It's not like, here's the thing, think of it this way. We can take either one of them. Let's take addiction first. No one in their right mind would ever go, okay, I can have an amazing, really nice life. I can go to meetings or rehabs and ruin my life and ruin my family. I don't know which to do.
Right.
They don't have that choice. And especially, the odds are stacked against them now. Like, companies have made drugs so addictive now.
True.
Don't stand a chance.
Right.
Death by suicide, another illness of the mind. Same thing. All right, let's see. I can fight these horrible thoughts every day of my life. I can see psychiatrists. I can be on pills, or I can have a great life. No. Our wiring is misfiring.
Right. No,
Our wiring is misfiring. And despite their efforts and our efforts, one of the things we don't know now, we know, because this is where it's confusing for people. We know now, I had a little cancer on my face. We know now, there's cancers, no big deal. They get rid of it, stage 1, da-da-da. And you know there's advanced stage 4 aggressive cancer. Right. You're going to die from it.
Right.
Someday in the future, we're going to know, stage 1 addiction. Go to a meeting a week. Mm-hmm. You're going to be fine. After 5 years, you probably won't even need it. Maybe you will need to keep going. That's stage 1. Stage 4 addiction, I'm sorry. Going to be losing you.
Yep.
Same thing, mental illness. Oh, stage 1, you're going to be a little sad, ups, downs. Stage 4, nothing we're going to be able to do.
I've seen it. I've seen stage 4 in both those things. And I've seen people go from stage 1 to stage 4. And I absolutely 100% see the chemicals, the chemistry in their brain turning themselves off.
And we see children with suicidal thoughts as young as 3 and 4 years old.
Wow.
Like, just, get another job, you'll be fine. Yeah. Well, what are we going to say to a 3 and 4-year-old?
Right.
Something's off there.
I've had friends. I mean, there's Gary Goldman, who was on this show, comedian, was talking about he had suicidal ideation very young. Very young.
Yeah.
And it's surprising.
And in grief, you have a loved one that dies of cancer, you're going to get 89% support from friends and family.
Right.
You have a loved one die of addiction, mental illness, death by suicide, drops down to 20%. No one's showing up with a casserole for you. No one's checking on you.
Because if they can't handle it?
Well, they think the person brought it on themselves.
I see.
And here's the other thing. Just think about this, why wording matters. First of all, we shouldn't trying to get people not to say committed.
Right.
Committed means a sin. Committed means a crime. Using the phrase death by suicide. The other thing is we say, her uncle was a suicide. Really? Was her aunt a pancreatic cancer?
Right.
We shouldn't make how anyone dies their identity.
But it's part of the story.
But it's not all of their story.
That's right. Yeah.
How they died isn't their whole story.
Yeah, I want how I die to be part of the story. I definitely want.
I'm sure it'll be interesting for you.
Yes, I mean,
if not, I'm going to juice it up a little. Something
like
I'm going to do something.
Some interesting death would be cool.
I'm going to say, Brown, things are a little boring here. What can we do?
I've always wanted to do that, Bugs Bunny style stunt of just trying to jump into a glass from a large highway. Like if you knew we were going to die, why wouldn't you do a stunt to end it?
What if you were just in the deathbed in a big bunny suit?
That's fine.
I mean, just a little something that throws people when they come in the room.
Itchy and uncomfortable, I'm thinking.
But a little slit in the back for what when that time comes,
Sure.
No, cleaning.
I have a question here from...
I've never had these conversations with anyone before, just so you know,
right.
Jay.
Grayson says, I always find it weird how much we shelter kids from death in our society. What kind of considerations should we make to give kids room and freedom to grieve? And am I wrong to think that more kids should go to funerals?
Oh, God, this is my friend. I don't know who he is, but he should be my friend.
Smart guy, yeah.
Here's what we know. I got to tell you, I see more people who have so many issues because they didn't get to go to the funeral.
Right.
And one of the things our modern world has done that I think is kind of wrong is this informed thing. You're going to say to your 4-year-old, honey, do you want to go to daddy's funeral? I don't want to force you or traumatize you. People tell me, I don't want to force my teenagers, my kids. I'm like, you're forcing them to do everything. Right. Oh, no, I would never. No, you're forcing them to go to school. Right. You're forcing your kids all the time. It's a moment. So the worst thing I've seen is that 4-year-old who doesn't get to go to the funeral because they said, no, I don't want. By the way, the normal thing, like this, to say to anyone, do you want to go to the funeral? Is no. Right. They're not a want to event.
Yeah.
That 4-year-old and 6-year-old says, when's daddy's next funeral? I want to go after all. Yeah. Oh, honey, you didn't realize that was a once in a lifetime event when I gave you the decision to make it 4?
Horrible. In my family, we make the kids dig the hole.
Dig the hole. Well, and in Judaism, you kind of really got to pack it on afterwards.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Kids need a couple of things. They need a little preparation. This is what you're going to see. This is what it's going to be like. One woman said to me, she goes, what about an open casket? My kid can't see the open casket. I said, is it an open casket? Yes, it's going to be an open casket. My kid can't see an open casket. I said, why not? She said, my kid would freak out, David. They'd freak out.
Right.
I said,
projection much?
Have you ever seen an open casket?
Exactly.
She goes, yes, and I freak out.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. It's how we handle it. If you say to a child, we're going to go to the funeral, it's going to be an open casket. When you go up there, you're going to feel very anxious. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, Jay, but when anyone tells me I'm about to feel very anxious, it makes me very anxious.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but if they see us doing a funeral with love and tenderness, it's so helpful. And parents go...
That's where the bunny suit would really help.
That's where the bunny suit would help.
Dress the corpse in a bunny suit, the kids would like it.
The other thing is people will say to me, all right, the goldfish died. We didn't tell Susie.
Right.
We said it swam to the ocean. The neighbor's dog died. And I'm like, when are you going to teach them about grief?
Right.
I mean, you're teaching them how to cross the street. They're going to deal with loss 100. When are you going to do that? I mean, are you going to wait till they're older and sacrifice a goldfish? I mean, right. You tell them when it happens.
Yeah.
When do I teach my kid? When the goldfish dies. When the dog dies, when the neighbor dies.
There's something about seeing a dead body too. Have you seen one?
Yeah,
several.
Yeah, me too.
And it's helpful in understanding that whatever the shell of this person, the person's gone. You get to see the person's gone. You don't.
And this was the suit we wore.
You don't think of a live person in a box under the ground. You think of this person is gone, right. And whatever made that person a person is gone. Right. And it's somewhere else maybe, but it's not there. It's right. Not in that. It's not.
And what's great about his question is you really say to that child, you're going to see grandma and she's going to look like she's sleeping, but not really. Mm-hmm. It's going to be eyes, but different.
Right.
And you're okay to touch.
Right.
People like, oh my gosh, the body could be dirty. No. If they've opened a casket, right. You can touch it. It's touchable.
Right. I think I don't know that I would force kids to see that, but if it
But happened, if everyone else is going to the open casket, you shouldn't tell them no.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
The kids should do what everyone else is doing. It's a great question.
Now it's time for listener mail.
Now it's time for listener mail.
Carrie writes, how do you fight the feeling that nothing we do matters? Or should we fight it?
I think the small things don't matter in the scheme of things.
Okay. But do the big things matter?
Some of them are look, there's two sides of this.
Right.
This matters.
Right.
We don't know in any given moment what might change us, help someone else. We don't know. We don't know how meaningful. So we don't know that. On the other hand, I have an antique, I don't know what you call it. It's a book that someone in the 1800s wrote, eggs, 2 cents, carton. It was like everything
an
they
accounting.
did.
Okay.
An accounting.
Yeah.
And I have that and I keep it. It's in a drawer in my living room to remind me in 100 years, it's not going to matter.
Right.
It's just not going to matter. Whatever I'm stressed about probably doesn't matter.
There's either two choices. Either nothing matters or everything matters.
No, I don't believe that.
Really? Okay.
No, God grant me the courage. Have we heard of the Serenity Prayer?
Right.
To know the difference between...
No, not that we can change things, but that
what can we change and what can't we?
Right, but our actions have the most minuscule but some kind of effect into the general pool of things. And it's not like one thing's going to make a difference, and it's not like...
But here's the amazing thing about this life is I don't know that we know.
Right.
I don't know that we know. People come up to me and tell me oh my gosh, you changed my life. And I'm like, what? Huh? And no, you don't understand. That wasn't even a change your life moment I was doing.
Right. Right.
That wasn't a helpful moment I was doing.
But it was to them.
It was to them.
Yes, that's right. That's how I feel.
Or to us. Mm-hmm. There's moments that are huge that no one would guess matter.
Right.
you know?
The last thing before we wrap this up is the moment of joy.
A moment of joy.
I love joy in the smallest of moments. I got to tell you, loving my coffee this morning.
Great.
Loving being here.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I'm going to like traffic on the way home.
Right.
But I love finding joy in small moments. And I'll tell you something. I'm amazed. One of the things I do at people's deathbeds is I ask them, what were your favorite things? And it's always the small things. It was 3 a.m. cereal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, that diploma, the promotion.
Right.
It's these small things that matter. That's what brings me joy.
Yep. Well, that's good to take with. So other people can find joy in other little things or big things. And like your book, Finding Meaning, the workbook, fantastic. I will
Available now on Amazon.
I'm excited.
Coming out soon.
I will go through it. Maybe I think I need to go find meaning in life.
I think you do.
I do. I need to go find it. And I like, I like workbooks. I like having something to do. That gives me joy.
It's really an interesting thing to sort of help, because no one's taught us how to excavate the pain.
Right.
To find the meaning.
Right.
And, here's the one thing that I hope it makes clear. People hear this and they go, there's no meaning in a horrible death. I go, absolutely. You're right. There's no meaning's in us. It's what we do after. And you got to get through the pain first. And that's hopefully what will help people.
What's one of the most meaningful things somebody has turned a death into that you've witnessed?
Oh, amazing things, from changing laws, changing the world, just being happier in their own life. It's really amazing how, I think, even one person said to me, her father had put himself through medical school as a waiter. And she said he was always talking about how undertipped waiters were. And so after he became a doctor, he was the most generous tipper. And then when he died, she said, I tip a lot now in his honor. Little moments of meaning like that are just so cool. That she gives waiters a huge tip in honor of her dad. She doesn't announce it to anyone.
Right.
It's not a big ritual, but it's something she does.
If I die before you do,
yes,
what meaning will you find in my death?
I will think about you. I can't believe we're doing this, but it's as a really sweet, smart, funny man, naughty sense of humor, really good comedian.
But you
great writer.
But
great
you won't start
writer.
a charity in my name. It's like something like
Jake
Hogan
no.
For humor.
No. You didn't make it to 5K walk status or no.
Yeah. See, that's what I want is a 5K walk in my name. All right.
No, look.
All right.
It might take the bunny suit.
Okay. Sure. All
it
right.
might take the bunny suit.
I'll wear it then.
Okay.
Well, David Kessler, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, my audience, for being there.
Don't forget where I am. Grief.com.
Yes, grief.com.
Grief.com.
For all your grieving needs.
All your grieving needs. And
do you sell a lot of grief merch?
No grief merch. No grief merch.
Some grief merch.
No grief merch.
All right. Well,
no grief merch.
Right.
And they can find me on all the social media. I am David Kessler.
That's why
I couldn't do I am Spock.
Yes,
but
I got it.
I am David Kessler.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Man.
And thank everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Don't be alone.